It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, Iran's Revolutionary Guard launched long-range hypersonic missiles mainly targeting the city of Tel Aviv and several military bases as more than 580 people were killed in Iran as a result of the Zionist bombings, with a possible U.S. military intervention. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that the killing and wounding of civilians in the southern part of the Gaza Strip while seeking food is unacceptable and called for an immediate and independent investigation. The A3+ group at the UN Security Council, including Algeria, has affirmed that a lasting peace in Syria can only be achieved through a sincere and inclusive political process. Hello and welcome on Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Salmani. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has received the Ambassador of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, James Robert Stephen Donner. The meeting took place in the presence of the Director of the Cabinet at the Presidency of the Republic, Boulem, and the Advisor to the President of the Republic in charge of Diplomatic Affairs, Ammar Abba. In a statement following his meeting with the President of the Republic, the British ambassador said that the two countries are making significant progress in several important sectors, mainly justice, defense, education and trade. He said that he had discussed regional and international issues with the President of the Republic, expressing his satisfaction to note that we share the same approaches and the same concerns, which is extremely important. The President of the National Observatory of Civil Society, Ibtisam Hamlawi, has received the Secretary General of the National Union of Sahrawi Women, Shabasini, to discuss ways to support Sahrawi women and promote bilateral cooperation between the civil societies of the two countries. The statement said the meeting was an opportunity to exchange views on the current situation in the Sahrawi refugee camps in the occupied territories and to stress the importance of solidarity with the struggle of Sahrawi women to recover their legitimate rights. The need for networking between Algerian and Sahrawi civil society actors was highlighted with a view to strengthening joint action in the areas of human rights defense and women's empowerment. In the same vein, a coordination meeting was held in the presence of the Secretary General of the General Union of Free Students. In recent hours, the situation in the Middle East has escalated dramatically with a new episode of direct confrontations between Iran and Israel. According to official Iranian sources, the Revolutionary Guard launched long-range hypersonic missiles into the enemy's territory. These missiles, identified as Fatah models, are capable of exceeding Mach 15 speeds, making them extremely difficult to intercept. The attack mainly targeted the city of Tel Aviv and several military bases. At the same time, there have been reports of widespread internet service outages in several cities in Iran, including the capital Tehran, as well as Isfahan and Shiraz. The political response was swift. Iran's ambassador to the UN, Ali Bahraini, warned that any direct involvement by the United States in the Israeli attacks would be met with a very firm response. He also described recent statements by former President Donald Trump, who demanded Iran's total surrender, as unacceptable and hostile as a provocation. U.S. President Donald Trump called yesterday for Iran to surrender and assured that the United States could easily kill the Iranian supreme leader on the fifth day of the military confrontation between Israel and Tehran. The U.S. President convened his Security Council at a time of intensifying speculation about possible direct U.S. involvement in the conflict, despite his stated preference for a diplomatic solution. In a reaction, several American politicians called on Trump not to take part in the ongoing war. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders called on Trump not to drag the U.S. into Netanyahu's war with Iran.
We are looking at the horrific war in Gaza, where, as we speak, thousands of Palestinian children are facing starvation due to Israel's inhumane and illegal war policies. And now we face a dangerous and escalating war in Iran, which was begun in violation of international law by the extremist Netanyahu government. And the main point that I want to make today is that it is absolutely imperative that the United States not be dragged into this war. But let's remember who Netanyahu is. He is a war criminal under indictment by the International Criminal Court for starving innocent people and killing civilians in Gaza. At this very moment in Gaza, Israel continues to prevent the UN from delivering humanitarian aid.
On the military front, the Iranian armed forces claim to have suffered more than 580 casualties as a result of the Zionist bombings, which included attacks on radar systems and nuclear centers. The humanitarian consequences are worsening. Thousands of civilians have begun to evacuate Iran and areas in the south of the country. Countries such as China, Greece, and Turkey have already begun operations to repatriate their citizens. The international community is on high alert. The United States has reinforced its military presence in the Persian Gulf, with Russia and Turkey have condemned Israel's actions, describing them as acts of state terrorism. For its part, China has called for restraint and requested an urgent session of the UN Security Council. The situation continues to evolve rapidly, and there are fears that further clashes could intensify in the coming hours. Russian Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia addressed reporters in New York when asked about a potential U.S.-Russia mediation between Iran and the Zionist entity. Nebenzia said Russia is coordinating, but they have no mediation efforts on the ground.
These hostilities, this thing should be stopped because it has absolutely unpredictable consequences. Given that we are talking about nuclear sites that are under threat, and given that the ballistic exchange continues with the casualties, heavy casualties, and now on both sides. Well, I think Iran would be prepared for talks to continue what these attacks by Israel stopped. In the context of its nuclear program, but the condition is Israel stops the attacks first. There was a conversation between President Putin and President Trump the other day, and President Putin said that we are ready to do what we can to facilitate. That was said directly to President Trump. So in that sense, yes, we are coordinating, but we don't have any mediation efforts on the ground.
That was Russian Ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that the killing and wounding of civilians in the southern Gaza Strip while seeking food is unacceptable and called for an immediate and independent investigation. This was stated by Farhan Haq, deputy spokesperson for the Secretary General, during his daily press briefing in Geneva. More in this report by Masoud Sharfi.
Commenting on the new Zionist massacre against the starving people in the Gaza Strip, Mr. Farhan Haq conveyed the UN Secretary General's strong condemnation of the killing of civilians seeking food. He called for an independent investigation, urged Israel to allow humanitarian aid, and reiterated the need for an immediate and permanent ceasefire.
The Secretary General condemns the loss of lives and injuries of civilians in Gaza who are once again being shot at while seeking food. It is unacceptable. The Secretary General continues to call for an immediate and independent investigation into all such reports and for accountability to be established. The basic needs of the Palestinian population in Gaza are enormous and remain unmet. Israel has clear obligations under international humanitarian law to agree to and facilitate humanitarian relief for all civilians who need it. The unimpeded entry of humanitarian assistance at scale must be restored immediately. The UN and all humanitarian actors must be allowed to work in safety and security under conditions of full respect for humanitarian principles. The Secretary General continues to call for an immediate, permanent ceasefire.
On Tuesday morning, the Zionist occupation army committed a horrific massacre against people waiting for aid at the Talia roundabout in Khan Yunis Governorate in the southern Gaza Strip, killing 51 Palestinians and wounding more than 200, including 20 in critical condition.
At the Human Rights Council meeting, the chair of the Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, Navi Pillay, said that the ongoing attacks on Palestinians are the most and ruthless since 1948, adding that the goal of the Israeli occupier is clear.
Yesterday at the Human Rights Council, and there I said that this is the most ruthless, prolonged and widespread attack against the Palestinian people since 1948. The goal of the Israeli government is abundantly clear as we continue witnessing the destruction of Gaza on our television screens and our newspapers in real time. As we said yesterday, an immediate ceasefire is the utmost priority and should pave the way for peace, justice, and accountability for all victims.
Navi Pillay added that a report to the Human Rights Council examined attacks on educational facilities and religious and cultural sites, stressing that 90% of schools and universities have been destroyed or damaged. She also said that the Israeli occupation forces committed war crimes.
Our report concludes that Israel essentially obliterated the education system in Gaza. More than 90% of schools and university buildings in Gaza have been destroyed or damaged, creating conditions where education for children has been made impossible. These attacks were part of a widespread and relentless assault against the Palestinian people in which Israeli forces have committed war crimes, including directing attacks against civilians and willful killing and the crime against humanity of extermination.
That was the chair of the Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, Navi Pillay. The World Health Organization WHO said it had received reports of a mass casualty incident. WHO trauma surgeon and emergency officer Thanos Gargavanis said this is again the result of another food distribution initiative.
Regarding the collapse of the health system, we are walking the fine gray line between operational capacity and full disaster every day. This means that services are barely available, and this means that health workers, supplies, fuel, all these assets that are very necessary for a health system to be fully operational and be able to support the needs of the most vulnerable ones, now is underperforming. It's underperforming for a series of factors, not for just one thing. The war brings along other worsening factors. It's really difficult to be saying that the system is on the brink of collapse now, before, and link it to a specific time frame. But I want all of us to understand that we are walking already the fine line that separates disaster from saving lives.
Let's recall that for weeks, medical staff have warned that Nasser Hospital could be overwhelmed and unable to continue to operate under the pressure of multiple casualties, lack of medical supplies and evacuation orders in the surrounding area Israeli occupier. Now, as you followed in our top stories, the A3+ group of the United Nations Security Council, including Algeria, Somalia, Sierra Leone and Guyana, has affirmed on Tuesday in New York that a lasting peace in Syria can only be achieved through a sincere and inclusive political process led and owned by the Syrians, in accordance with the principles enshrined in Security Council Resolution 2254. Masoud Sharfi.
Speaking on behalf of the A3+ group, Ambassador Benjama emphasized that the Syrian people's resilience and desire for peace deserve full support. He stressed that Syria's stability is crucial for regional security and called for meaningful action to promote peace, justice and reconciliation through dialogue and mutual respect.
The Syrian people's resilience, courage and aspiration for peace and dignity deserve our full and steadfast support. Despite a delicate semblance of stability, the situation in Syria remains deeply fragile. Stability in Syria is not only essential for its own people, but it is also a cornerstone for the security and prosperity of the entire region. Yes, the future of Syria is intrinsically tied to the ability of its people to coexist peacefully, as they have done for centuries, and to overcome the grievances of history through dialogue, through reconciliation, and mutual respect.
The A3+ group stressed the need for justice, reconciliation, and inclusive dialogue to support Syria's political transition, reaffirming its support for the country's sovereignty and unity.
We believe that transitional justice, national reconciliation, the clarification of the fate of missing persons, and inclusive dialogue are fundamental to healing the wounds of the Syrian people and building the foundation for a just political transition in Syria. The A3+ reaffirms its unwavering support for the sovereignty, unity, independence and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic.
The group condemned repeated Zionist incursions into Syrian territory and cited UN reports on attacks and barrier construction along the ceasefire line, calling them violations of the disengagement agreement.
The A3+ strongly condemned the repeated Israeli incursion in Syrian territory and the violations of the disengagement of forces agreement. UNDOF has reported that the Israeli Defense Forces carried out several strikes in the area of limitation on the Bravo side and has observed the continued construction of counter-mobility obstacles by the IDF along the ceasefire line.
The A3+ group condemned violations of Syria's sovereignty and regional stability, urging an immediate end to such actions and respect for the 1974 disengagement agreement, and reaffirming that the occupied Syrian Golan is legally Syrian territory under UN Resolution 497. The group also highlighted the worsening humanitarian crisis, urging donors to meet their commitments and support both emergency aid and sustainable development. Mr. Benjama, on behalf of the A3+ group, called for unified efforts to reintegrate Syria into the global economy and stressed the importance of early recovery programs in health, education, and agriculture to foster inclusive growth.
At the meeting, for her part, Deputy Special Envoy for Syria Najat Roshdi told the Security Council that Syria simply cannot withstand another wave of instability amid the ongoing aggression on Iran.
I must convey to this Council the Special Envoy's profound and growing alarm over the potential consequences of any further escalation, not only for the broader region, but particularly for Syria, a country already stretched beyond the limits. Syria simply cannot withstand another wave of instability. The risks of further escalation in the region are not hypothetical. They are immediate, severe, and risk unraveling the fragile progress toward peace and recovery in Syria.
The world celebrates today the International Day for the Elimination of Hate Speech, an opportunity to raise awareness of the dangers of this phenomenon, which is spreading faster than ever across the globe, and to highlight the need to promote tolerance, dialogue, and inclusion. Said Bourazi tells us more.
In July 2021, the United Nations General Assembly highlighted global concerns about the exponential spread and proliferation of hate speech around the world and adopted a resolution on the promotion of interreligious and intercultural dialogue and the elimination of hate speech. The resolution calls on member states to take measures to prevent and combat hate speech, including through the promotion of tolerance, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and the elimination of discrimination. It also encourages member states to promote dialogue and cooperation between different religious and cultural communities and to combat hate speech through education, training, and awareness raising. This resolution, which proclaims 18 June as the International Day for the Elimination of Hate Speech and was celebrated for the first time in 2022, recognizes the need to combat discrimination, xenophobia, and hate speech and calls on all relevant actors, particularly states, to increase their efforts to combat this phenomenon in accordance with international human rights law. This day is a special opportunity to recall the importance of interreligious and intercultural dialogue in countering hatred and promoting mutual understanding. It is also an opportunity to highlight the destructive impact of hate speech on individuals and communities, as well as on peace and security, and to stress the importance of defending human rights and promoting peace, justice, and sustainable development, notably through the fight against discrimination and exclusion.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Thank you so much for joining us.